Thanks a lot. Very engaging session, in fact, and I'm happy I was here early. So over the next 10 minutes, what I will try to do at least, all the smog outside has led to a lot of smog even in the tax implications on e-commerce sector and otherwise. So in the next 10 minutes, I will try and clarify some of the smog, and let's see what happens at the end of that 10 minutes. So it's important, for us to understand how the e-commerce world works, right? And what's the opportunity on the e-commerce front. We all know that it is in a super speed. It is catching up on all fronts. We also know that, most of India is on internet, is on mobile phones, and we see everyone over here, in fact, also have multiple mobile phones. So you see a lot of internet usage, which also means that there is going to be a lot of e-commerce usage. There will be online sales which will be carried out. Today, as we speak, 100% of the PIN codes are all adopted, all of them have adopted the e-commerce model, which is there. And by 2030, it is projected that 40% of India's population, which is close to 500 million or 600 million people, will be onboarded onto e-commerce. So this is the opportunity, and what e-commerce does, we all know. That it gives you access to the customers across India and also the logistics support. But with this space, and I know my topic is tax, but with this space that the business is moving, it is also important that the tax compliances, and that's where I am here, more specifically the GST compliances also catch up speed. We know that we are today sitting in a single place, but working across locations because of the accessibility which is provided there. And hence, it's important for us to know what are the basic compliances that one needs to carry out for onboarding onto the e-commerce portals, which we see. I have split that into 3 requirements, and that's the only slide I have, so I will not keep it too heavy. The first requirement, of course, is the GST registrations, right? As you are also selling today in your offline outlets, the moment you start selling and you breach the turnover of exemption, which is around 40 lakhs for an intra-state supply, you are required to take a GST registration. Right? Same way, if you are going to be onboarded, you will be required to take that registration on e-commerce. The only difference is because you may store goods across India. The moment you're going to do that, you may have an office in India, in let's say Delhi, but you will have warehouses where the goods are stocked across India. You may have to take registrations over there, and that's critical because that will enable you to take the input tax credit and not cause any tax leakages over there. But one of the biggest questions still recently was that, in offline, we have these exemptions of taking registrations, right? Whether it is composition dealers, whether it is 40 lakhs turnover exemption, which is provided for intrastate. That was not there for e-commerce. That was something which was not available. From rupee 1, you were taxed. However, recently that has been amended. To get parity between offline and online sellers, the GST authorities have in fact ensure that you can, even if you're not registered, you can supply through the e-commerce portals. However, it is critical though that you can do that only if you actually have the exemption, whether you fulfill the conditions of the exemption. So it's important that way, but at least that brings you onto a level playing field. So that's from a registration perspective. Before we understand what are the compliances for sellers, what are the key compliances for e-commerce which impacts us as sellers is also important for you to know. There is a concept of tax collection at source, which is TCS, similar to that of the income tax provisions in GST as well, where e-commerce operators are required to deduct earlier 1% and now 0.5% of TCS of all the sales that you make through the portal. And of course, if the underlying supply is taxable, only then. If you're exempt or if you have the registration is not required and you have not obtained any registration, you don't have to do that. So they do this deduction and they have to deposit this on a monthly basis by filing a monthly return, which is then moved by technology onto the return which we file. As sellers, we are required to actually carry out a couple of compliances. And I would not say these are in excess of what you already do as an offline seller. As an offline seller, you would be filing monthly returns and annual returns. That's the same thing that will happen from an e-commerce portals. The number of registrations, of course, will increase if you have storing goods across, but that's the cost of business, and I'm sure the business expansion outweighs that. The other thing is whatever TCS is deducted by the e-commerce operators is directly reflected in your cash ledger in your registration. You don't have to do anything. It's automatically there on the cash ledger. The moment you go and file your monthly returns, you will be able to offset that liability. There is no problems at all, and this has been there from day one of GST. But this also means that since there are multiple sources, today as a seller, you may be there in multiple e-commerce portals. You may have TCS coming from various portals, and you have your own offline business. So it's important you reconcile this. I think that's something which is very crucial in today's time, that you reconcile the TCS, which is part of the tax, to the actual turnover of your supply. There shouldn't be, and if I were to just give an example, let's say the e-commerce portal has deducted 100 and you only have e-commerce sales, but it can't be that your liability is only 200. It will be multifold, right? Because the tax which is deducted is only 0.5. So you need to ensure you are reconciling that. And the last enablement which has been provided is the refund of TCS as well. In today's world, we all have a lot of input tax credit on GST, and which means that any cash deduction which is done by the operators, that could lead to an additional cost. But that as well, the government has prescribed a refund mechanism. Fairly simple, within 60 days you get your refund. It is streamlined. If you have enough input tax credit, go ahead, use that, and this TCS which has been deducted will actually be refunded back to you. So that's what broadly are the compliances. Now if you look at it, what is it that is different? The only thing that is different is the TCS, right? Everything else is at par from an offline seller. And that in its own is not an additional compliance for you. It is, of course, an additional compliance for the eco to deduct that from the payment made to you and deposit that in with the GST authorities. For you, it is more important to reconcile that, which means that you will have better control over the business that you are carrying out, and you will have multiple sources to verify this entire thing. So this brings the entire e-commerce portal and e-commerce sellers in par with offline. And when I say par, I'm talking more from a tax front. Of course, we all know and we heard about some of the things in the sessions earlier as to how e-commerce can be better, or offline can be better, or you have to adopt even e-commerce as early as possible, even if you are right now predominantly in offline. So that's broadly what I wanted to cover. Hopefully I've cleared some of the smog, and if not, I'm still around, so please catch up and I will be happy to take questions offline from you guys. So that was a short presentation. I hope you have a great day, and thanks for being a patient listener.